How can you be less controlling? Personally, I'm a controlling person, and I would guess you are a controlling person. Maybe I just need to think that way so that I feel more in control about how I'm a controlling person, so I need to believe you're a controlling person. But why are we talking about how to be less controlling today? My experience is the more we can let go of control in our life, the more we get peace, we get more contentment, we get more creativity, spontaneity, and intuition, in my opinion. So, my opinion, a lot of good stuff we get when we surrender some of our control. And I do find when we don't take a conscious look at how we are controlling, our control methods start to control us. And we start to live a very control-based life where our behaviors, our whole life dance is control-based. We might be avoiding certain things, people, situations, and experiences so we can feel in control. We might be, our relationship dynamics that we participate in may be engineered primarily out of control. So we can start to live a life that is based on control. So as you and I dance with how to be less controlling, let's not get tricked by control and think that our job is to start to control how we control so that we can be less controlling. Nope. Then we're 3 layers deep into it. That would all start to control us, by the way. So if we start to try and control how we're controlling, that whole thing will control us. There's the 3 layers deep that we'd be in. So I'd like for you and I to take a look at how to be less controlling through a surrendering perspective, so that we're just not tricked into being more controlling, but call it less controlling. I'm controlling in this moment. I'm trying to control how you hear me. I may be trying to control how you think. I personally hope that I'm not doing that. I'd rather you think whatever you need to think. And me wanting that to happen, that's controlling too. And I'll surrender and allow that control to happen in this very moment. Why are we so controlling? I personally think everybody in this world is controlling, and I think we will be controlling until the day we die. So I don't think control is something we're going to eliminate. I think it's a part of our life, and I think it's actually an important part of our life. The question is, do we have enough control in our life where we've gotten out of balance? Or are we relatively in balance with control? I think the part of us that needs control is our ego. Control for the ego equals power. At least the illusion of power. When you're in control, controlling people and manipulating people, I don't think that's real power, but I think for our ego, that control sure feels like power. And there's a little bit of a paradox. If for the ego, more control it has, the more powerful it feels, I think to our spirit selves, or maybe our heart, the more we surrender control, the more true power we experience. And that's scary for our controlling ego. Here's we're talking about how we can be less controlling. In other words, surrender some control. I think that's very empowering for the human spirit that lives inside of us and feels like a loss of power to our ego. Loss of control equals loss of power to our ego. And then when our egos get more control and say, yes, I've got more power here. This is good. I would dare say our spirit self is over here saying, I'm experiencing a diminishment of true power. I think it's a paradox. There's a Zen saying I absolutely love. I'll throw at you at this point so I can be more controlling. The Zen saying is, what can we truly control other than our ability to surrender our need to control? That's cool food for thought if you ask me. Those Zen people, controlling people. With that said, I'd like to throw some specific steps at you that from my perspective are very powerful at helping you surrender control rather than trying to control your control. First, learn to recognize the active and passive polarities of control. Active polarities of control, these are the easy ones. These are the ones where we might say, yeah, my husband, my wife, they always get their way. They're controlling. Yeah, they tell us what to do, tell us what, how things need to be. So we recognize, okay, that's the active expression of control. But there we are, just as controlling. We're the passive expression of control. Passive control is oftentimes those of us who would say, they're the ones in control. I'm being controlled. What that tells us is we get a sense of control by being controlled. It's like if you put a 5-year-old, on the CEO's chair of a company and gave the 5-year-old all this control, 5-year-old would actually feel very out of control. But for the 5-year-old, having everybody around him or her be pretty much in control in an appropriate way, the 5-year-old feels in control by being controlled. Pretty interesting. So active control. Again, pretty obvious. I always need to have my way. Or I change situations so that I can have the way that I need. That's redundant, JP. I just said that. Passive control. We're not a tight fist of control. We're the open hand that appears to have no control. How come people are always controlling me? Because I get a sense of control by being controlled. It's unconscious, but that's how I control. So in other words, I think we need to absolutely recognize the active and passive expressions of control. Otherwise, if we just recognize the active, then we'll stay just as controlling. Our controlling ego knows it's got a good hiding spot on the passive polarity of the control. So this Yahoo JP upstairs, he's learned to recognize how I control in relationships and business. So, screw him, I'll outsmart him, and I'll just become passively controlling. Someone who's, another quick example, someone who's mega rich. They're very actively controlling with money. Not necessarily a bad thing or a good thing, it's just a control thing. They're very good at controlling money. Passive, if someone's got no money, they're very good at controlling money. They control it through the passive expression. Second step I'm going to ask you to consider for becoming less controlling is allow yourself to control without shaming it. In my opinion, it takes a lot of courage and vulnerability to look at how we're controlling and actually allow it to, hey, I'm controlling in this moment. There's certain things that I think are so important that I'll raise my voice when I say them on this very video. That's me being controlling. And I'm okay with it. I recognize it. So hopefully that method of control doesn't start to control me in this moment or control my life. I recognize it and I allow it, as opposed to shaming it. Go up to someone on the next friend get together you have and say, hey, you're really controlling. Nobody takes it as a compliment. We have inherent shame about our control because it goes back to our ego. It wants control so it doesn't have to feel afraid that its life is going to end when you kind of boil it down to its primordial roots. So because we have shame about how mortal we actually are as humans, we inherently have shame about the strategies we use to compensate for our fear of mortality, control. So if you can do your delicate best to not shame yourself when you recognize your control strategies, you are money ahead when it comes to being less controlling. When we shame our control strategies, we're actually trying to control our control strategies. We're trying to bury them deeper. And guess what? Because I have so much shame about this control strategy, that control, that need for control, it will be met elsewhere. It'll just be a more misdirected, probably passive way so that I don't recognize it, so that I can avoid my own shame about that control. So in other words, my ego has to trick itself into not seeing how I control so it can avoid needing to feel more shame about how controlling I am. We're tricky people. I think humans are probably the trickiest species on Earth. Next to dolphins, they're always up to something. With that said, the third strategy I'd ask you to consider is search for the feelings that are buried underneath the control. When you recognize a control strategy, wonderful. Allow it, wonderful. Here on the third step, how to approach it is imagine what are the feelings underneath this control. If you pretend for a second that any control strategy is in part trying to bury some kind of feelings. I control, so that's dirt on top of the feelings. They're buried. I don't have to experience them. So search for what the feelings are. I find oftentimes fear. When I get controlling with my girlfriend, oftentimes, the reason why I'm trying to get my way here is because I'd feel afraid of being unloved if I didn't control my girlfriend to sort of relate to me the way that I can feel loved and accepted. In other words, feel like a familiar sense of attachment. So I control her in order to avoid my fears of feeling unloved. And that's pretty interesting, by the way. To the degree we're controlling is the degree we're not connecting to ourselves or other people. Here we're talking about connecting to feeling. And also in relationships, control displaces connection. Surrendering control allows connection. Beautiful. So you get to imagine, you don't have to know for sure, but I would invite you to imagine what are the feelings you have in this moment when you recognize your control strategy. Next thing I'm going to ask you to do so that I can feel like I'm controlling you. It doesn't mean I have to control you. It just means part of me gets to pretend I'm controlling you by inviting you to do things that I feel are truly beneficial. Oh, God help me. I would invite you to play a little game for the next few days. Everything you do, or as many things as you do that you can apply this with, everything you do, be black and white. Imagine, okay, everything I do, I'm controlling in some way. Your job is to assume you have control in everything you do. See if you can recognize it. Recently, my girlfriend and I, we had a little stray kitty with a hurt paw show up in our front bushes. And we went out to feed it. It's like, oh, that's like a really good thing to do. And I think it was. I would judge it to be a good thing to do. And I realized, at least my part in that, is we were being controlling. I felt out of control seeing an injured cat there, potentially hungry and uncared for. So I tried to create a sense of control by caring for the cat. I wouldn't change that. I will recognize that, I'll allow it, but I'll at least see that control. So it has less of a chance of controlling me. So even when you're quote unquote doing good, virtuous things, my challenge is even see how part of you has a hand of control in that. Thank you for dancing with me here on how you and I can be less controlling so that we can actually be more peaceful and more connected in our lives. And with that said, so that you can feel more in control and I can feel more in control by believing I'm controlling you to be more in control, be sure to subscribe to my channel and I'll talk with you next time.